So that's what the focus of today's live is about, is the building of, the foundation laying of the agent-manager relationship. And I put them together for a couple of different reasons, which I'll talk about in just a minute. We're on 1 minute call. 1 minute call. Get your people in. Get ready. Here we go. Last sip of coffee. We're counting down in 5. Here we go. Whee! We got in the house. Sheeta's in the house. Well, Sheeta's here, so I can start now. 1 minute. 1 minute. 1 minute. Ding, 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 ding. You ring the bell. Whee! Here we go. Starting. Alrighty then, everybody. Welcome. Good morning. And Miss Alana's here. I'll be seeing you tomorrow morning, Miss Alana. We are now officially live and rolling, and this is you guys' agent-manager relationship. And as I just said a second ago, I want to make sure I officially say it here. You know, one of the previous lives, I was talking about changing representatives, which is something that we unfortunately, inevitably, commonly have to do. And no different, as you hear me say all the time, you guys, so much of this profession is just like life. And certainly in the conversation, when you put the word relationship in it, it's the same as a relationship in life. Intimate, siblings, parental, friends, whatever it may be. There's always an inception point, but most of those evolve a little differently. That's why I always reference the dating versions, because what happens at the inception point of any relationship is there's a great deal of curiosity, but it changes. The dynamic changes because it's not quite as mutual in this profession as it even is in life when you're wanting to go out with someone or get to know them. And it's for this reason, and this is the very thing we have to remember, and it's 99.9% of the time. If you reach a certain status, then what I'm about to say does not apply. But up until that point, we all know that even though we hire, technically, legally, we hire a representative, we all know that at the inception point for most of us getting a representative, they have more power. We need them more than they need us. And that's a really important dynamic. Not to get hung up on and not to be irritated by, but it's an important dynamic in a relationship building premise for at least us to be very, very, very conscious of. And as it is with any relationship, what we tend to start out with, because we're curious, we want them to represent us, but we also have to ask questions. And what I've found over the 30 years plus and all the years of doing the Actors Network is when people would bring up agent-manager issues, I could literally trace them back to the inception point of that first meeting that you had. It doesn't matter, guys, in the pandemic, whether the meeting was on Zoom or whether the meeting was in person. It doesn't matter if it was one-on-one or if you were meeting, let's say, as I did with CESD, with the entire department, 3 or 4 people. It doesn't make any difference. What we have to do is we have to ask questions, because in any relationship, there's the what I want, what I need, and then the have to. And we tend to, natural human beings, we focus on the want. We want them to want to represent us, and we want them to do a great job and get us out a lot, which means lots of job interviews, which we call auditions, right? That's what we want. But because of that dynamic, that we need them more than they need us, I have found historically, high percentage historically, that it shuts us down in that inception meeting or the first or second meeting a little too much from being curious in a way that's important. Because I know what you want, but then there's also what you need and there's what you have to have. What you want is you want results from them and you want them to sign you. What you need is you need to understand how they view you, how they're going to represent you, what they see you as going out for. You need that information. You need to know, because we're a physical product, right? You got to need to know what that is. And then there's the have to part, which is the biggest part for me about an agent-manager relationship, and where I think most of the stuff breaks down, is you have to know their guidelines. You have to know their protocol for communication. Whether it has to do with booking out, whether it has to do with how you confirm things, it doesn't make any difference. And it doesn't matter to me. Yes, you need to know whether or not you're signing a contract. You need to know what's in that contract. You need all of those things. No question. Hey, Carla. Hey, Dawn. Good to see you guys. You need those things. So understand that you have to start out in any agent-manager relationship with a set of questions, and they have to be based on not just what you want from them. I mean, not just what they expect from you, because they're going to ask you questions. They're going to tell you what they want. They may want new pictures. They may want you to focus on certain things. But you're going to have to ask questions based on what you want, what you need, and what you know you have to have. Certain things have to do with skill sets that you need to know about. Anything to do with nudity, you need to know about. There's the have to part of you have to put them up on casting sites. You have to do certain things. But you have to have questions, guys, about this. It's really important. And yes, some of those questions are going to change. Are you meeting with a commercial representative? Are you meeting with a theatrical representative? Or are you meeting with someone, sometimes like a manager, or just someone who's a small company that's going to represent you ATB, across the board? So you have to craft some questions. Now look, I want to be careful about this, okay? Because this is an IG Live. I'm not telling you that you go into a meeting with 17 questions and you just start pounding on people. This is a relationship moment. This is the inception point of this relationship. You always want to be you and have a sense of you in a meeting so they get a vibe for you just as a person. I will tell you now that when you're not making any money as an actor, or significant money, most of the reason why people are going to choose to represent you, it's usually a combination of three things. And that is, they like your look, they're interested in your physical type, they like you, like there's a vibe about you that I want to work with that, I want to work for that. And then there's this element, and that's most of what I wind up talking about, which is what seems to be your degree of professionalism. Are you going to be high maintenance? These are the things, this happens to us in life. We do this in dating. We start noticing people's behavior. We start paying it and like, oh, is this person, when they're just talking, seem like they're going to be high maintenance, male or female? None of this matters. Sexual orientation, none of that stuff matters. It's just assessing. And you have to do some assessing, but also you're being assessed. And I'm sharing with you that 6 or 7 or 8 really well-placed in an inception relationship meeting questions are going to be really valuable down the road. Because what you don't want to find yourself doing in an agent-manager relationship is saying too often, oh, I didn't know that's how you thought. Oh, I didn't realize that's how you worked. Oh, I didn't realize that you needed that from me. I didn't realize that I needed to tell you that. These are things that you don't want too much down the road because they cause a great deal of confusion and thereby consternation. You don't want to know what someone's booking policy is, their reply time, their mechanism, text, email. You don't want to wonder about these things, just like you don't want to wonder when you're younger. I mean, does somebody want to get married and have children? How are you going to raise those children? Does somebody have a problem with smoking or just cigars, or does someone drink? All of these things, you guys, are part of building a relationship. Well, just transfer them over into this profession. Where are you at in your career? If it's commercials, who are their contacts? Who do their clients mostly go out for in commercials? Do you have any contacts that people like you in the commercial world if you're meeting with someone commercially? These are questions they're going to ask you. There's nothing wrong with you asking those in return. And I'm sharing with you that everything ultimately comes down to communication. Yes, we want stuff. Yes, we need to know certain things. But I am sharing with you that you have to know. We use this term all the time, so this is not unusual for you. We use the word boundaries all the time. People use it on a daily basis. And sometimes that word gets a bad knock. Hey, Merrick, good to see you, bro. Sometimes that word gets a bad knock. It's not meant to get a bad knock. It's not about fencing someone in or being too rigid or any of that stuff. It's just having and starting out with a working scenario. Now, I know, guys, I'm not goofy. Well, I am goofy, but that's a whole other subject. I know that most of the time that we choose to leave a representative or start seeking a new one typically is because we're not getting enough activity with them. I understand that. But if you'd reverse engineer the agent-manager relationship and you know this, then start from that premise. I would always ask somebody this question in a meeting. I would ask them, based on my type and where I'm at in my career, how often do you kind of figure you're likely to create an audition for me? I always wanted an answer to that question, not because it was math equation, because it was science, or because it was something that was, legally binding or in a contract. I just wanted to know the reaction to that. Same as you would do on a date. You'd ask somebody a question about, well, how do you feel about traveling? How do you feel about hiking? Do you like the ocean? We have all of these questions we naturally do. But with representatives, you guys, it gets much easier. Yes, did I always get one, Alana? Yeah, I did. Always. Always. The thing I looked for, funny enough, Alana, about the response to that question sometimes wasn't as much the actual answer as it was how quickly they answered. Because remember, hey Z, hey Valerie, because remember this. They called you in for a meeting. This is why I want you to look at the process of how we get to even having a representative. Because the relationship down the road can grow, it can evolve 100%. It can become a little more familiar. It can do all of those things. But let's remember, Alana, from the very moment that they choose to have a meeting with you, they've already seen your picture. They've already looked you up on IMDb. They've probably watched your demo reel. There's a lot of basic pre-research they've already done on you. So a lot of times when I would ask that question, just so I had a sense of what they were thinking, I'm asking them a question that I feel they should have already thought about. I mean, can you imagine being, 27, 28 years old and going out with somebody and maybe on the second or third date, you asked them if, how they felt about marriage, and the person, again, doesn't matter who's answering the question, the person just sat there for a minute and go, huh. Yeah, it's not the answer to the question. Why did it take you that long to come up with that one? It seems like a fairly simple question. Yes or no? You have kids? Yeah, sure. That kind of response for me is not so much the response I'd get from the question, Alana. It's the time it took for them to answer it. So, and again, I'm sharing with you, this is an important statement. Most agents and managers who are up here would never be bothered by 90-some% of the questions an actor could ever ask. They'd never be bothered by it because it's a business. It typically is the smaller mom and pop shops or individuals who seem to be bothered by actor questions. But I'm just sharing with you guys. I know you want to get an agent, a manager, and or a new one. But I'm just begging you to not go into a professional business relationship in this area blind. There's just some stuff you have to know. Are they going to submit you for modified agreement films, micro budget, spa? This is why learning these things, this is why I'm going to continue to build an entire library on YouTube. You have to know whether or not they're going to submit you for those things. You have to know how they feel about you being proactive. If that's what you're going to be, you have to know how they feel about other elements of work. These are all questions that are, if you're going to have a second meeting, cool, you can split them up. But there are just things that you need to know about the business relationship. There's stuff you absolutely want to know about them. I used to ask people all the time, what got you in the business and why do you stay? That was one of my standard questions. Hey, Nigga, good to see you. Wow, long time. I used to ask the question all the time. What turns you on about this business? Why are you in it? I absolutely would ask that question. And yes, before you asked me, Alana, yes, I would get an answer. But I wasn't trying to play gotcha. But I need to understand what it is that turns you on about this business if you're in it and you're my representative. Think about that word, man. They're representing the all of you. So these are things that I wanted to know. I wanted to know some of the, just a couple of names of contacts in theatrical that they were close with. And you can do some of this research yourself, of course. You could just go to them on IMDb or IMDb Pro. You can look at their clients, look at the star meter, see what those people have worked on. You can probably get a sense from that they probably know this casting director or that casting director. Cool. But again, the engagement part, that word we use in social media all the time, it's like getting somebody to reply to you, to answer those questions. Okay, so aside from me putting up my stuff on casting sites that associate me with you, and I have an IMDb, what else do you need from me? Maybe being in class, but those are the three standard things. Casting sites, IMDb, are you in class? Outside of that, ask them. Ask them, do you need to know anything about my special skills? Do you need to know? What you want to do, guys, is you want to create a lovely conversation in the inception point of this relationship, because down the road when shit happens, because it always does, you have a proper playing field of engagement with this person. Sometimes you'd be surprised, about the stuff that comes to mind or comes into play that you haven't thought about. If you've done predominantly guest star work up to this point, are you willing to do a co-star? In what instance would you be willing to do that? That's maybe not a first meeting question, but these are things that happen throughout. And what I've discovered is, and it's not always our fault at all, is this is where I say that we're the most undereducated profession in the world, bar none. It's because this conversation we're having right now doesn't take place in high school, ever. It doesn't take place at universities, even Ivy League schools. It doesn't happen. Those professors who are helping you get your arts degree, your bachelor, and they don't have this conversation because they don't do it. They haven't sat in that chair 100 times like I have. I've had 46. Just think of all the people that have turned me down. It's a long list. So I'm just sharing with you. And then you get down the road into things. Hey, Murray, good to see you. Wee. Then you get down the road and you get into situations where people are submitting you. Let me give you an example. This is a common scenario that happens. You get down the road and all of a sudden you start getting auditions from your representative and you don't like them. They don't seem like things that, well, if you haven't had an early conversation in this relationship about the kind of stuff that you sort of see yourself doing, just pop me the question, Murray. Just write the question real quick so I don't get too off track. Just write it in the comments there so I can see the question, love. Thank you. If you haven't had a pre-conversation with that in your relationship, then that's going to be a hard thing to bring up. You at least want to broach in the initial meeting what it is they see you as and how it is they most would send you out, especially theatrical. Theatrical is a lot more convoluted than just commercials are. A lot more. Way more. And so you really want to get into, and this is part of knowing yourself. At any age, 16, 17, 18, 28, 38, 48, doesn't matter. What are you up for doing? What are you willing to do? Just want to join. Oh, yeah. I tend to not put folks in the video, Murray, just because it throws off my train of thought. That's all. Being on the live. I occasionally will be having some guests on, but I don't usually add anybody to the screen. So my apologies, but I don't. Oh, Celine's here. So when you start going down the road, when I come out of a meeting, first meeting, what I do is I send an email back to them and I memorialize what we discussed. Now, this is really important to me. Again, you don't have to make it a medical science email, I promise. You don't have to be, rude to them. But what I like to do is when I finish having this inception meeting, as the relationship grows, I go, hey, listen, thanks very much for your time. It was a pleasure meeting with you. Make sure you always ask people at the very end with a representative. Make sure you always ask about how long they'll be taking to assess you and decide whether or not they want to work with you. Sometimes people throw that at you right off the bat, but if you haven't, make sure you ask so you know. So I would always type someone an email, or back in the day, I would reiterate this at the end of the meeting before we had email of like, so we talked about blah and the thing and the whoop-de-doo and the hoo-hoo dilly and the thing, and I got all that right? I didn't mess that up, and that's what I would put in an email. I just want to make sure I got this A, B, C, D, E, F, G, cool, and thank you for sharing with me that you guys were going to take 2 or 3 days, and I look forward to hearing back from you. It's not really a thank you note, it's more just a memorialization communication to sort of establish what you guys discussed. But when you think about all the stuff you face as an actor, how much you get out, pictures, demo reels, common question actors can ask, do you typically try to get feedback? I'm going to share with you right now, most representatives globally today do not promise feedback for every client, for every audition. I'm not saying you shouldn't ask it, but if you ask it, just ask it with a qualifier. Anytime you say something, anytime you give consideration in your questions, like, I realize you can't do this for every client, for every audition, but I don't know, I love the percentage question. Like, 50% of the time you get feedback, or 20% of the time, or 10%. And again, don't be surprised if a representative says, hey, if you get a call back, that's your feedback. That's, again, a common answer. Same as I might ask somebody, what's up, Guns? My man. Once again, one of the things I would ask people is, hey, how often do you pitch? Yeah, just what percentage of the time? Not for me or any one client, but just in general. Do you spend 10%? I would always give people multiple choice questions. I mean, it's like 10% of your day, 20% of your day. Again, Alana, going to your question back to me, it was just something I wanted to see them respond to. I wanted to see, hey, Lorenzo, I just wanted to see what their response is. But I also kind of want to know, because that's some of those boundaries, the fence around a relationship. You can discuss contracts, you can ask them, and again, I always recommend you don't sign contracts on the spot. If it's a SAG-AFTRA contract and it's a standard, you can sign that because all of those guidelines and out clauses are built in there. But if it's a customized GSA, General Services Agreement, or if it's a managerial contract, take it home for 24 hours. Don't sign it on the spot. But you have to know what your administrative protocols are, as we do in life and a relationship. You have to know how they see you. You have to have a sense of some of their contacts, in my opinion. You have to have a sense of how long they've been in the business, what their life's been like, their resume as a professional representative has been. All of these same things they're going to ask you. So where are you from? Tell me about yourself, blah, blah, blah. We get all of those. Turn those back around on people, because most of us know that when you have a representative, again, skip the pandemic, you guys. Let's not do things based on the pandemic. But when you had a representative anywhere in the world before the pandemic, and probably hopefully sometime soon coming out of the pandemic at the time I'm recording this, the question's going to be, how often can I swing by and say hi for 2 minutes? Again, put a qualifier on it. Can I buy you a cup of coffee near the office for 15 minutes once every couple of months? These are questions that have to do with how your relationship engages. We do all this naturally in life. We don't know to do it or know how to do it as much with agents and managers. And one of the reasons why we don't is because we're desperately afraid of making a misstep. I mean, I'm not saying that at you, and I'm not making that part of your world or mind. I'm just sharing with you, as someone who's done this for a long time, that we are concerned, a little bit of eggshells, about saying or doing the wrong thing early on that will cause someone not to represent us. It's just natural, man. You put your best face forward on date 1, right? Maybe a little bit more relaxed on date 2. And then Merrick asked this question. Speaking of, the callback is the feedback. Yeah, it is. I booked some theatrical, but only once. Yeah. Are there many callbacks these days for a guest star and below? No, I mean, learning to walk with, welcome. I would say, Merrick, this is the thing with that question. Again, part of this has to do with your level. So I would not be surprised by the fact that maybe if you're doing what we used to always call a pre-read, that there might be a callback. Obviously, there are callbacks in commercials. That still goes on no matter what app you're using, whether it's Blue Jeans or something else. I think callbacks occur commercially during COVID. Theatrically, I think it's less, maybe, but it wouldn't surprise me if for some of the smaller roles, for small co-stars and such, probably not as much with guest stars. I just read and I either book it or don't. Again, I always consider my feedback whether or not a casting director sees me again, but I've been like that for a long time in the way that I view that. But again, this is that question. Let's just take, Merrick, that question you just asked me. This is an example of agent-manager relationship. Are you comfortable asking that question to your representative? This is what I want you to feel as I get towards the end of this live. I want you to feel and know and trust that you can stop by once in a blue moon, and I do mean once in a blue moon, and say hi, and no one's going to hate you because you walk in for 2 minutes and you walk out. I want you to know that if you write someone a question at your representative on an email, that they're going to actually reply to it. Or do they prefer relationship client questions on a text? I want you to know the difference of those two things. This is the same as all sorts of rhythmic mood things we do in life with our partners. We get to know each other over time and then it becomes unspoken. But with representatives, because you're one of many, many, many clients depending, it's really, really imperative that you sort of get the stakes in the ground of where the guidelines and boundaries are, and then also what you're thinking about on the same wave with regards to, are you willing to travel? Can you actually be a legitimate local hire in another city? These are all questions that lend itself. Some of them are administrative, some of them are representative, and some of them are pure business, and some of them are personal. But you want to try to get as many of those out in the first couple of meetings with someone that you're going to choose to work with. And that's why the contract thing, the takeaway with the contract, is a really good way to be able to have a second conversation. Sometimes they'll, create a second conversation. But one of the questions I would ask is, here it comes. Question would be, hey, if we're going to work together, I'd love to have a 15, 20-minute follow-up meeting. That would always be something that I would say, because that's when I would come in with the second level questions, the ones that are a little more particular, a little more specific. Thank you, Mary. That's what I would always do. If I was going to work with somebody and we'd agreed to that, I would say, that's cool. I have a handful of other questions just so that I function well as a client. I'd always put it on me. That's how I'd language the question. And guys, I learned this the hard way. Please know, I screwed some of this up, but I just learned it really fast. I learned fast how to do this. And so I would always ask for a follow-up meeting. And so when certain people said no to certain things in my career, I didn't work with them. I moved on. And I learned how to move on from representatives, which is why I just discussed in a live changing agents or managers. I learned how to do it because no different than dating. Sometimes, you ain't got to go home, but you got to get up out of here. And now that it's 9:31, I got to get up out of here. So, and please understand, and I say this all the time, you guys, this is a 6-hour conversation, the one I just had, because this goes on to actually lining out specific questions. This is why I'm slowly building the library I'm going to build over on YouTube. This is a long, long, detailed conversation. But I just want to give in these lives a little sprinkle. Okay, hey Celine, great to see you. Bye Sheeta. I just want to give you a little sprinkle about, so you can start thinking. I want to percolate. I want to light the pilot light on a conversation about how you build that agent-manager relationship. And that's what all of these lives are. They're almost not even cliff notes. It's just a little taste test from Baskin Robbins. All right, you guys. Beautiful. It's hump day. Get through Wednesday, and we'll see y'all on Friday. Peace out. Talk to you guys later. Thanks for being here. Cheers.